And back again. Sorry about before. We're Daleks there. I have no idea where they came from. We will destroy. It's terrible. Although I used to like Doctor Who. I saw the latest Doctor Who one, by the way. I don't know if William Russell ever watched Doctor Who, but the new ones, man, it's terrible. It is just terrible. The only thing familiar is that the TARDIS was still there. And that's going back some years. It must be at least 500 million years old, if you believe in time travel. William Russell is the farm manager at Pig Creek Homestead. William is a Tasmanian farmer who specialises in producing ethical pork, beef, goat and lamb on a 365 hectare land of regenerated land, that is, on Tower Hill, has taken over the Fingal Post Office, saving it from closure. William, thanks for joining us. Tell us about this. They were going to close the post office, and basically you mob went in and said, no, bugger that for a joke, we're going to keep it going, but you expanded so you can buy your groceries there too.
Yeah, well, that's the plan. So we're still early days at the moment of setting up the shop at the post office, but essentially the community came together and we attended a community event that the locals run to raise awareness of Australia Post trying to find a licensee to take over the operations there. And myself and our family, we thought, well, for us to sell our produce, being that we're an off-grid farm, we don't have refrigeration facilities here. We really need a shop front to be able to store our produce. And after we crunched some numbers, we came up to the realization that we think we could make a go of keeping the post office running while also providing a retail outlet for our produce.
Tell me the size of your area and how important is the post office?
Well, the township of Fingal, there's only about 400 residents, but we also support the rural surrounding areas, which is a lot of farmers. So in addition to the farmers in the surrounding towns, we're really up to around that 700, 750 people.
Mm-hmm. And it's pretty devastating too, isn't it, when you haven't got a post office? Do you have any other banking facilities there, or do you have to drive a couple of hours down the road or half an hour down the road?
Well, even half an hour down the road there, we only recently lost the bank there at St. Mary's. So Australia Post is also our banking facilities.
So you'll be the bank and the produce supplier. I mean, could you post your bacon? I mean, maybe you could do little packs.
I have been talking to Australia Post and say, as soon as you get into refrigerative transport, let me know.
It's going to be an interesting experience. What about the support from the locals? They're pretty chuffed about it.
Oh, they're thrilled. The response that we've received the last couple of weeks since we've took over the post office has been phenomenal.
What about the decision to take over? Because again, it's you've got to have these centre points. I believe you'd have a pub there, wouldn't you? No, you haven't. It's terrible.
That's a long story. The pub's actually been closed for a number of years. Actually closed before we moved here. So we've been here for 6 years. There is a gentleman who's slowly renovating the pub, but we don't see it reopening for at least another decade.
Jeepers! So the liver is getting some good treatment, but you got to have a beer. So just tell me, for the topography of the area, the geography of the area, if you wanted to go out for a night out, except to your mate's place, where do you go?
Night out, probably Launceston. So you're looking at an hour's drive.
Jeepers! You wouldn't want to drive home.
Not after a few drinks.
I'm sure the local boys in blue are very understanding. Not.
No.
Hello, hello, hello. Pull over, driver. Whoops, sorry about that. Okay, so okay. Would it be then off of me to say that it's a very remote part of Tasmania?
The northeast is, but it is also a growing area as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been sort of missed over the last 10 or so years with tourism. But now that there's a lot more tourism happening on the east coast of Tasmania, and the Fingal Valley where we're situated is the route to the east coast.
So I'm just thinking here, being a remote area and stuff, of course, there's plenty of room to develop if you're a business or for the area, as you mentioned, because of, of tourism and things like that. When you moved, and you said you've been there for 6 years, you would have had a plan, obviously, to develop the actual farm. Are you still on track for that, or have you decided there are new opportunities, and that you're also going to make the most of those, so that your plan is constantly evolving?
Well, our plan is constantly evolving, but we did hit a major setback only 4 months of moving to the farm. We lost pretty much three quarters of our boundary fencing due to a big Fingal bushfire that occurred. So we were only here for 4 months and the whole hill caught alight. And we had to evacuate. We were away from the farm for 10 days. At one point, we thought the house had gone, but thankfully the local fire services saved the house and our historic buildings on the farm. But because of that, no boundary fencing, the funds that we had set aside for our initial livestock had to go into new fencing. So it's really delayed things by about 5 years.
Wow. It's not easy to come back from. That's a fair investment chunk that you can't access now. So what do you do then? I mean, sure, you got to reevaluate things and treat it like a business. When you took over the post office, did you have thoughts about maybe we can't do that? We haven't got the funds to do it, or the budget to do it, or was it just a no-brainer?
Well, we did the finances on running the postal service, and unfortunately, being such a small community, running it as a post office by itself was not viable. So Australia Post really looking for someone to partner with to do complementary businesses. So while we can have the post office running, which pays for the rent and the power and so forth, been actually able to have a retail outlet for some of our pork sales, which is we started doing pork because it was less capital intensive to get going. And we have been slowly starting to branch out to other products.
Tell us about what you're looking at for your shop itself. I mean, the produce, and give us a description of. Let our imagination run wild.
Well, I haven't quite come up with the sales blurb yet, but it is regenerative. So the farm principles that we're doing is ethical and regenerative. So we want to improve the landscape and treat our livestock in an ethical manner.
Which is actually, at the moment, we with our World Today program, we have been looking at halal killing for the animals in the UK. We found that, and we have found that it's not necessarily based on religious reasons. It's just based on cost-saving reasons. We've also found out that New Zealand, every piece of meat, it's not pork, but every piece of other meat they export to the UK, it's halal. What about in your area? Because you mentioned ethical, and I'm from the land, and I used to see all sorts of terrible things. How important do you think it is to have ethical growing of, say, livestock or whatever? And is it actually worth the investment? Because it's a lot slower. If you look at regen farming in the UK, it's a long process. What about with yourselves? I mean, again, you've had a plan in place, but have you noticed any when you start something, you think, yep, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. At the end of the day, you realise there are little hurdles that you come across that you need to adhere to and to take notice of. So what about yourself? Did you, the ethical farming bit is fantastic and full marks to you there, but is it worth it commercially?
It's a lot more challenging, definitely. The last few years of our pork sales, we've been selling direct to public. And with that, we've been hiring a cool room trailer, and we schedule in advance to deliver down to Hobart and to Launceston. But after we factor in all the costs of transport, the hire, the processing, what we were charging at that time, at the end of the day, we're close to break even. So for the last couple of years, we've been like treading water. And that's where we've thought, look, we really need to be able to package at the higher value cuts in a retail process, the lower value cuts, can we value add that? And as part of the post office, the shop, we're looking at setting up next year a micro bakery and turning those lower valued cuts of meat into gourmet meat pies, sausage rolls, pasties, things like that for the tourists.
Forget the tourist. I mean, you have a post office. My weakness is a meat pie, I have to tell
Oh,
you.
the locals are chomping at the bit already.
Well, the last grand final, the AFL, the real football grand final we had, I mean, meat pies, they just disappeared in our family very quickly. Where do you see the future of farming? I mean, you're doing regen farming, but what about just the future of farming itself? Because whether it's the USA or whether it's throughout Europe, whether it's the UK, Australia, it's a very, very hard operation. And with all the inverted commas climate change agenda, farming is undeniably under attack at the moment. Is there a future in farming, or is it just going to get swallowed up, the smaller farms, by the big ones, unless they do regen farming and other smaller, almost niche markets?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but it is looking like it is. Small farms are going to be swallowed up by the big guys, but I think it is a possibility and it is practical to have smaller operators trading locally on a regenerative basis. But there is a lot of challenges in that.
Yeah, it's a hard job, and we talk to farmers right around the world, and it's no different. It's just getting harder and harder. I think
And
the
a lot
people.
of that difficulty is the red tape. There's
Mm,
more and more red tape every year. Like
mm.
even just to process your livestock, ideally we'd like to have an on-farm slaughterhouse, but to do that, you're talking about $1 million plus
Mm.
in getting the facility set up and licensed. It's not practical.
And then you've got to have an understanding bank manager, and then you need to make some money on top of that too. The understanding bank manager, if you find one, let me know. Because they're not all that understanding these days. And my dad had a farm, and I won't name the bank, but it did some terrible things to him at the end. What do you think? Here's something for you. What do you think is the main threat to farming? Is it weather? Is it markets? Or is it government?
Uh, Weather and government, I would say. Uh, Ideally, if the government just get out of the way, we'll be able to do what we do best, take care of our land, provide nutritious and ethical food to our clients. But yeah, changing weather has been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it's a hard yakka, isn't it? If somebody wanted, because you're online, are you online?
We're on social media. We're actually working on the new website at the moment.
It's good. Which will come first, the post office or the website?
Uh, well, probably the post office because we need to keep that going to keep the locals happy. But
Hmm.
over the next probably 6 weeks, I should have a website up and running.
Fantastic. Okay, now the socials. If somebody wanted to find out more about the farm and yourself, and where to get some good meat from, and ethical farming on top of that, where would they go on socials to find out more about you?
Facebook, Primal Pastures Tas. We're also on X, Primal Pastures T.
Mhm.
Um, Not so much on TikTok and all that much lately, but it's mainly those two.
Absolutely brilliant. We need some pics, by the way, so you get a chance. Send us some photos, and we'll photos. Do they use that word these days? Send us some pics, and we'll put those up. Just a brilliant. Good luck with it, because it's a hard haul. Very rewarding, but a hard haul. Two things I hope: that one, you do better, and you start to get yourself into the black really nicely, and the post office. And secondly, if you can bring forward the opening date of the pub, I wish you all the best. I mean, a town without a pub, jeepers, you have to
Yeah,
drive an hour. You got nice
yeah.
wines around there, but it's
And that's why it was so important to keep the post office running because if that closed, the town would have died.
yeah, it would have, which is very sad. But unfortunately, regional communities throughout Australia, also rural communities in the UK, under constant attack, mainly from government. William Russell, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
This is, I keep wanting to say the country practice, but this is the Country Telegraph.
In my lifetime, I have watched this erosion of access, of farmer access to retail dollars. Meanwhile, we're seeing farmers go out of business hand over fist. And the average farmer is now 60 years old. So in the next 15 years, half of all America's agriculture equity is going to change hands. The land, equipment, machinery, buildings. The question is it all going to go to Vanguard, BlackRock, Bill Gates, the Chinese? I mean, who's going to do this? And meanwhile, America has gone to a convenience food addiction.
Very, very scary indeed. More and more is coming out now that it's just getting increasingly hard for US farmers to make a living. And some shocking stories that are coming out of the from social media about that. It's the same right around the world. Farmers are in trouble. They are under attack, not necessarily by the weather, not necessarily by the markets, but mostly by government. This is The World Today and the Country Telegraph. It's very interesting in the moment in the UK because we have Starmer. Starmer is a what can I say? He's a pretty he's a very ugly prime minister, and his government is very ugly too. He says in Parliament, "We've set out a roadmap for farming which has been welcomed by farmers. Reality says different. The Labor government's roadmap for farming has been condemned by farmers. In fact, over 6,000 farmers and farming businesses have closed since Labor came into power."
It's a record amount. We've set out the roadmap for farming, which has been welcomed by farmers. And many thousands of farms have benefited from the farming schemes. But she talks about prices. Wages are going up higher than prices. That's the first in a long time that's happened.
So there you are. That's an incredible Keir Starmer. Mark Fogarty, or Fogarty, I'll find out if it's Fogarty or a Fogarty. One can sing, one can't. I'm sure he can after a few beers, but I'm never going to tell him he can't sing. He's a director of Bushtricity. Mark, thanks for joining us. Fogarty or Fogarty?
Oh, look, either or. I think they all crawled out of the same Irish bog, 150 odd years ago. So I'll answer to any of the above.
And a few beers, I'm sure you sound even better than ever. Not. Tell me about Bushtricity.
Thank you, Mike, for having me on. Bushtricity is about, it sort of started back we had probably once in a century drought in Australia, ending in 2019. It was pretty devastating, and I set Bushtricity up then really as a service, I think, to look at how we might get a more equitable return to farming communities from any energy outcomes. I sort of have a history in renewable energy, so I understood it fairly well, and Bushtricity was really an attempt, I think, to promote some equity for rural and regional communities principally in New South Wales, in Australia, and principally in what we call the New England, which is the northeast end of New South Wales. So, strong farming, agricultural country.
Tell us about the scale of renewable energy projects being proposed for the regions you have represented, and which regions are we talking about?
My main focus is on, my background is primarily in renewables across New South Wales, but certainly in terms of Bushtricity, primarily in the northeast, in New England, which is an area starting roughly around Tamworth, for those who understand a bit of New South Wales geography, and stretches all the way up to the border to Tenterfield, across to the coast, and then down to and out west to a place called Inverell. So it's a fairly big slice of New South Wales. It's what we call the biggest renewable energy zone, or res zone, in New South Wales. It's about it's got some fairly large regional cities, Tamworth and Armidale principally, and a lot of, I think, rural and regional towns. So it's heavily populated. It's quite a strong agricultural area, particularly in terms of grazing. So it's very much the red meat part of the world. It also does cropping as well. So a very important agricultural centre for New South Wales and for Australia in terms of our contribution to the overall export.
Could you tell me about, I think it's RED4NE?
Yeah, okay. That stands for Responsible Energy Development for New England, which I was principally setting up, which is really the community's opportunity, I think, to form a collective of community interests, and to form a collective on taking forward. The R stands for responsible energy development. What happened in New South Wales and pretty much across Australia, we had in 2016 in Adelaide a wipeout of energy. The state blacked out, once in a century storm, tempest, and the country and the state went black for a period of 24, maybe longer hours. So it sent a bit of a shockwave. The government, as occurs around the world, then went into panic and set in place some sort of fast track to come to grips with what they needed to do to underpin the Australian grid, what we call the national energy market. We've got a long, skinny grid for those not familiar with our geography. Stretches from basically Cairns all the way round to Adelaide. So it's a long, thin grid line, which is pretty much reflecting where our population centres are in terms of the coast. So it was an attempt to get in to understand, as we started to phase out fossil fuel, what we needed to do to bolster that. And these renewable energy zones that I've described earlier and the one in the New England emulated from that process. It was like a lot of experience globally. Again, the New South Wales energy transition, the Australian energy transition, was very much a fast track race to net zero. It was very much a speed skating exercise. And getting very much down to the theme of your process, our argument would be RED was necessary, I think, to pick up and to provide some opportunity for the rural and regional communities to get their position on the table and to argue collectively. And so RED now operates in the New England. It's got 11 smaller groups, so each of the smaller communities become members of the alliance, and so it's fairly well organised, and I think it's hopefully will continue to have its impact. It's getting more now to the business end of the season with the rollout of transmission. So it's been probably one of the strongest groups. I note last week you had Chris Muldoon on from Oberon. Oberon's another example of a very strong group, and these groups exist in pockets around the country, whether it be in Victoria, whether it be in Queensland, and communities tend to try and get their voice on the table.
You developed a submission, I think in 2025, that outlined a litany of issues involving this rollout of renewables. Could you just tell us a bit about that and some of the issues?
Yeah, I think it's. I go back to what I said earlier: is that the whole roll forward of the race to net zero, and it's very much a topical debate in Australia, as you appreciate, Mike, politically. and globally also, is to, what does it actually mean, and how, and what sort of commitment do we need to have. So this race to net zero meant a fast tracking by a lot of developers who were more interested in what we say flipping projects and profit outcomes rather than responsible energy rollout, rather than looking at developments that had much more social license and much more, I guess, and much more complementary to what our interests were in rural and regional Australia, and that obviously is agriculture.
Do all projects go through a proper process of environmental and regulatory reviews and cost-benefit analysis before they go ahead?
Well, let me say they do go through a rigorous process. We have planning governance on the table in New South Wales. You have in Queensland, Victoria, and much of it really is supposed to be reflecting on environmental impact assessment. So assessing the impacts of these projects in the setting that they exist, whether it be in a rural town or near a rural city, and they're assessed very much on the biodiversities, on the other environmental impacts, principally on what we call ESD, ecological sustainable development, and that includes social issues as well. So that's the theory behind it all, and that's what should happen. What tends to happen is it's sort of governance that's driven very much out of metropolitan political centres, and it's governance that is very much more of a tick-the-box process. We're not as skilled as we should be in the way this is developed, and that's clearly the view of the regional communities. It's a long, laborious process, and it's a costly process, as you were alluding to earlier, and it's a process that people talk about reform and those sort of things. But there's getting to the second half part of that question you asked, which was the question of cost benefit. Well, unfortunately, that's underdone in the process. So we're not really sitting down and working out what the overall cost is, as opposed and its contribution to public interest. It tends to be swept under the table. So we're very much, I think, at this point in time where most of those issues dominate, those green issues, most of those net zero issues dominate rather than the public interest issues. So Australia is very much at the crossroads as we start to head into a very, very expensive energy proposition. Our energy prices have gone up 39% overall, and there's no sign that that's abating, and that will continue to increase. So the cost is clearly escalating, and the benefits are questionable in terms of what they overall bring, because we also happen to be, much to our credit, the largest per capita rooftop PV energy economy in the world, and South Australia sort of leads the charge on that. So we haven't got the balance of that right. We certainly haven't got the balance between the large-scale projects and the rural communities right. We haven't got, one of the themes of coming onto this program, that balance between agriculture and development right. We're still quite clumsy in the way that we deal with that.
Yeah, it's a real issue, isn't it? Because so far, most of the people we've had on have been very concerned about their local communities and the destructive elements of renewables. So you're right, there needs to be a lot more consultation between government and the communities. If it keeps going the way it is, and Chris Bowen has said that, I think it's 1.38 trillion, he's going to spend on 1,001 windmills and solar farms and all that sort of stuff. I would think, talking to all these communities, that we probably need to do a lot more consultation and probably work out how can we not destroy community. And then you look at the environment. Look at in Queensland, great chunks of the Great Dividing Range are being bulldozed to put in wind turbines. So that alone it throws up alarm bells to everybody. How do we get around that? How do we get that? Because people don't trust government, and government really doesn't give a rat's whether they trust them or not, because they're going to roll that tractor over the top of them at the end of the day, whether they like it or not, unless they're booted out. If you look at the opposition parties, except for One Nation being one of those, the rest of them are all in the same boat. I mean, which is Labor, which is Conservatives? You can't really tell. So how do we get back the trust and the consultation between communities and government?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because we hear a lot of lip service to this coming out of Macquarie Street in my state, the Bowen, the Communities Matter and things, but we just don't see a lot of traction on the ground in what that actually means. And so the transmission that's responsible for conveying what's supposed to be the cheapest form of energy is just continuing to go through the roof in terms of its cost. Every second Sunday we see Snowy 2 hit the manure hit the air conditioning unit in terms of its overall costs. And so it's just escalating and out of control. Communities are a cost, and the governments have got to work out somehow or other how they will them on. And yes, there's NIMBY issues, but more, that's just a convenient tag tend to label the communities with, which is not necessarily the case. And I was just listening to some of your lead articles coming in, and the girl from the UK talking about issues like mental health. And these are massive issues in regional Australia, because, I mean, a lot of these projects are dividing communities. The cohesion is evaporated, and so you'll see a lot more pressure on these communities in how they hold themselves together, and some of them are so divided that they won't come back for generations to come. So these are the hidden factors that I think they've got to think about as they go forward, dealing with this rollout, and the social issues that are very much on the table. It's certainly, there's issues associated with loss of agriculture, and there's the issues associated with food security, but there's big issues associated with health and well-being. So we need to see a far more, I think, dedicated and bona fide commitment from the government, bona fide being that Chris Bowen does what he says. So, for example, 18 months ago, we had a survey done by the Electricity Infrastructure Commissioner, a guy called Andrew Dwyer, who came up with 9 strong recommendations to improve community engagement. Only one of those has so far hit the table, and there's been no progress on that. So you've got to ask yourself a question, whether they're serious in what they say they're going to do. One assumes that they've got such a big mandate from the last federal election, 93 odd seats, that they don't really see the need to do that. Maybe the bush doesn't matter. There's platitudes from all political parties, Macquarie Street or Spring Street in Melbourne, Brisbane or Canberra, that sort of said, well, it's not really, they're not really serious about this. That's kind of where we're up to, I think. And going back to one of your other points there, Mike, I think it's pertinent to just reflect on the last week or so in politics, and I saw the leader of the Greens from your state being interviewed yesterday on the Insiders, where the Greens are starting to become a little bit more divided as a political party between what they should be doing on biodiversity in respect to these projects and what they should be doing to support climate change. So I don't know where all that's going to land, but the classic case of that is in Robins Island in the north end of Tasmania, where this is a very large project which has been opposed by the Bob Brown Foundation. Christine Milne is the chair of that, and a number of the senators in the Australian Parliament, the Green senators, also so opposed because the compromise to biodiversity is far stronger, far more damaging than the benefit, the upside to climate change. One other point, Mike, just going back to it, is what will change this a little bit is economics. The economics of particularly large-scale wind has taken a bath in the last 2 years. It's gone up. It's almost doubled in terms of the cost of installing this equipment. So this is mainly European equipment, and it's not just the cost of the turbines, but it's the cost of the transport, the cost of the installation. So we've got a massive economic, I think, challenge facing the government as they attempt to deliver on Bowen's commitments to 2030 and beyond. The projects have just not been built. And so this will hang over, I think, for the next 6 months or so, and it may very well be we had no projects reach financial investment decision in the first 6 months of 2025, and I can't see anything on the horizon that said that's going to change. So it might be a dud year totally on onshore wind. And onshore, there's only one thing more repugnant, I think, to communities is onshore wind, and that's offshore wind, which globally, of course, is taking a complete haircut.
Yeah, I just tell me this: what do you think? Which has more weight, the voice of regional communities, or the dollar, as investors' dollars?
Great question. Look, I'd like to think the voice of regional communities, but look, the dollar is very powerful, and I think that as developers begin to understand that the old days of riding roughshod over communities has got not only got social license challenges, but economically it's a basket case. So um, let's say both. I'll hang my hat on hoping that the social license and the acceptance of the need to engage communities prevails, but the mighty dollar, I think, will be a major contributor to the slowdown. I think solar is not so bad because it's cheaper, and it gets to the other point then of one of the themes of your show, energy of food security, and how we better roll that out. For many people sitting around the world watching this, well, you have a look at the geography of Australia. We've got only around about 6% arable land in New South Wales, only about 4% nationally. We've got a lot of desert.
Mm.
We've got nobody living there. We've got no transmission. But logically, in terms of solar rollout, it's a shoe-in.
If just putting on your economics hat for a second, Cap, because I can't wear it because it keeps falling off. It's just so I've got such a big head. But the problem I see is that, okay, first of all, I don't believe in the climate crisis one iota. However, if, for example, we say yes, there's a climate crisis, the world is going to boil, freeze, split in half, end up Uranus, something like that. So if that's the case, and you look at how much we affect the entire globe, which is not very much at all, it's minute. Is it worth spending all that money, for example, $1.38 trillion, destroying communities, bulldozing over communities, probably destroying the regional way of life? Is it worth it, do you think, if you believe in climate change and the crisis, we don't make any effect? So part two of that one, are we doing it so we can show the world that we are really good at what we're doing, and the rest of the world, such as China, the US, maybe parts of Europe, are saying, oh, really? good luck destroying your own country.
Look, you make a compelling case to agree with there. I think, Mike, realistically, we don't have that impact. And I think we're starting to see some green shoots when people's appreciating the need, I think, to get this into a little bit of perspective. I go back to this interview last night with the Greens, left me a bit gobsmacked. The new leader, Larissa Waters, but on again about the Northwest Cape and on again about Woodside and on and it's broken record. But you know we make money out of exporting. We provide NDIS, we provide pensions, we keep the economy going. We produce for this country a standard of living you can't jump over. And it's the same with agricultural product, where kids out of the city will come up and be pushing the energy transition. And, well, we don't need to export that much beef. We don't need to have these agricultural products. So there's a complete naivety in I think, sections of the community that says, we're going to have this tremendous impact with 1% of overall emissions, which obviously we're not. You make that point well. Secondly, why are we going to shoot ourselves in the foot? And why are we, I think the word of the moment in debate, the deindustrialisation, why are we trashing a lot of the small, medium businesses that rely on energy for the sake of it? I think, without using the word, neither of us used it, the word woke, but certainly many of the woke philosophies that are currently there and hopefully will continue to come under question. It's a very difficult argument, and I think we're out of step a little bit, and we're being naive on that issue.
Interesting. I go back to my school days. I think we had electricity. Yeah, we did have electricity, and it was from reliable sources too. Throw that part in. But when I was at school, anybody that came out with something like, at the moment, the amount of turbines, solar farms, destruction of the environment to save the environment, which doesn't make any sense. If somebody came up with an idea of such, they would have been kept after school. Parents would have given them a box in the ear. They would have been told, grow up. That's just ridiculous. What's happened to us along the way? Because it is ridiculous. And I believe entirely that Bowen, Albanese, that I don't think they're very bright people, and many would agree with that. And I think the idea of having something so big, this great big project, turns them on. And it's going to be the destruction, I think, of Australia. Because look at the environment. So back to the part of this great big thing that they're doing. Do you think that's about what it is? That the people like Albanese, the bureaucrats that support it, are saying this is a great big, exciting project, and that's about it, because they can say, I'm going to hang my hat on this project because it's the biggest in the world. What are your thoughts on that? Because I truly,
look, it's driving it. It's absolutely driving it. Is that certainly there's an egotistical thing there, but when you look at the history of this, it sort of gathered momentum back in the Al Gore days of the inconvenient truth, and it's sort of the Kyoto Protocol and all of these sort of one-upmanships, if you like, around the world. The French in 2015 with their decree. And so it's become that way. And the most alarming demonstration of that may very well be is the ambition of the Prime Minister and Bowen to secure this, what's called the Conference of the Parties, for Adelaide in 2020, next year, 26. And these things are essentially, I've been to 3 of these things, and they're essentially bureaucrats that turn up that work through and work out all of the protocols and things and how they might work, and spend weeks and countless flights to get to these things. We want to have that. Now, why do we want to have that? at a point in time when we've got a 39% increase in our domestic energy prices. I don't think this has been very well thought through politically. And it gets to your point, well, here we are, we're showing the world that we're this wonderful green environment. Well, I just think it domestically will come back, I think, to bite Albanese and Bowen, because people are not silly. They're paying for their groceries. They understand the 39%. They get their bills every month, and they're not seeing. No one is buying the story that it's going to come down anymore. Not even the government is pushing that. So why are we one-upmanshipping that by having this conference here? It makes absolutely no political sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a what did Donald Trump say? It's a scam. It is, truly is. But that's just my humble opinion, Mark. If somebody wanted to find out more about what you guys do, how do they do that?
Well, look, you can look up Red for New England is probably in the New England what we do the best, and we quite active up there. Bushtricity is my show, and people can email me if there's an email address. But it's more going to be, given the theme of your Inquisition today, it's more about the communities, and so probably Red 4 or the Voice for Walker in Walker, or Chris Muldoon, as he communicated to you last week. It's the Oberon against wind turbines. These are community groups that have, emboldened themselves, and they're taking I think, the debate forward, and it's a matter of people understanding that they're not NIMBYs. These are people who are in real communities that offer, export opportunities to Australians, and it's very important to our future. So I think going through the groups is probably the best bet.
Yeah, I think so. I think the interesting though you mentioned NIMBYs. When I was growing up, it was nuffies. It's still the same end, the same meaning at the end of the day. But I do like the NIMBYs. And being on the Gold Coast, we're not too far from Nimbin. Hopefully that the wind's not blowing our direction. Otherwise,
I thought it was a place near Lismore, but anyway, I learnt that over time.
depends at which. If you're downwind and they're having a chuff, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Mark Fogarty, Director of Bushtricity, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mike. Well done. Program's great. Look forward to watching it.
Thank you, sir. This
Yeah, mate.
is The World Today.